The moment people start distrusting banks, the economy slows down. Money is a myth. The central bank is effectively owned by the government, so it never fails.
आपने बैंक से खरीदा आरबीआई ने बॉन्ड खरीद लिए बैंक को दी तो बैंक के पास है ना पैसे
हाँ बैंक के पास है बट बैंक ओवरनाइट रखेगा कहाँ? During the financial crisis, the FRA-OIS spread had widened. Less amount of currency in circulation, you can manage a much larger economy.
And inflation in the end hurts the poor man the most.
So it would be wrong to say that inflation only hurts the poor. There is a shortage of money.
Why is it for a country like ours, Rupee has been just perennially, depreciating?
Unbacked cryptocurrencies definitely are a fringe phenomenon. That is kind of threatening stability of the state. Money is like blood in the body.
Neelkanth, welcome back to another episode. Last year, I think I remember I was talking to you and you told me that you are trying to study money very seriously. And I felt, यार ये इसका क्या मतलब? नीलकंठ तो 20 साल से इकोनॉमी समझ रहा है. Like, why does he need to study money afresh? But simultaneously, I also realized, money is a very integral part of the entire economic system. It's kind of, glue or fluid that kind of keeps everything moving. And perhaps, on deeper introspection, maybe none of us really understand how money works, right?
Correct.
So first of all, let's start with the motivation. Why did you feel the need that you need to, especially somebody like you, need to go deeper and try to understand this?
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show again. See, money is a myth.
Money is a myth.
It is.
Yeah.
And so it's such a deeply believed myth that the fact that you and I believe that something in the bank account is my money, or what is happening right now with gold in Fort Knox and in the Bank of England, whether the gold is really there or not. So people, if everyone believes that a certain country has the gold, even if it is kept outside, it could be that some country's gold is actually kept in Fort Knox, but people will say, they have the gold. So it's all about illusions. And frankly, just like religion or caste, all of these are illusions we have created, or designations in companies that I am the CEO, I'm the COO, I'm the CFO. All of these are just illusions.
You're going to give a lot of people serious existential shock just at the beginning of this, but let's continue.
No, but these are myths which are very important for us to work collectively. And therefore, you'll see that as humans have, or the human societies have evolved, they've moved from very basic forms of barter to a lot more sophisticated forms and progressively more sophisticated forms of money and currency.
All the way to cryptocurrencies.
All the way to cryptocurrencies. And therefore, the reason for me to be so interested in it was one that it is so critical for human society to function, and it is so deeply ingrained in us that we pretend that we own that money, but it is only when a bank run happens, when people start saying that look, things are going to be so unsafe that having a gold ETF is not good enough. You need to have physical gold. And so that means that there is a complete breakdown of economic models and societal beliefs. So one, I think that is why. And second, and as you rightly said, no one really understands money very well. It is one of those myths. I think is very badly understood. It is so integral to our functioning, but no one really understands it well. And when I say I don't understand, people don't understand it well, is that, how is it really created? And frankly, over the past year or so, actually 2 years, I have been trying to understand that at what point does the central bank really create money? At what point? So it's very clear to see how a commercial bank creates money, but is it? How does the Okay, so let's take a step back. Let's think about how the central bank works on money. And
मम्मी उसके पहले even like almost like what is money? इंडिया में हमारी 4-4.5 ट्रिलियन डॉलर की इकोनॉमी, कंट्री के पास कितना मनी है? Let's start with there. वो
see, money is we will come to that.
Okay.
So money is a utility. Money is not capital. Money is something that you need to transact to keep liquid and all that. So there are various forms of money or various levels of money. So there is what is called M0, which is base money.
जो हम कैश यूज करते हैं वो M0 है?
नहीं. So it has mostly cash, but some amount is also banks deposits with the central bank. So there's a cash reserve ratio, CRR. So if a bank has 100 rupees in deposits, 4 it has to keep with the central bank. It is meant to be a signal of safety, that in case there was a run on the bank, at least that much money can be taken out. So it's currently 4% in India. At one point it used to be very high. In China at one point it used to be 20%.
India it is 4%.
4%. So CRR ratio is 4%. Anyway, so M0 is currency in circulation, physical hard currency, coins and stuff. And then there is the bank's deposits.
What is the meaning of hard currency? Let's say my bank account has 10,000 rupees, but in my pocket I have 100 rupees. Both are M0?
No. 100 rupees
is M0.
Is M0 plus 4% of that 10,000.
I see.
Is M0. So if say 46 trillion rupees, 1 trillion is 1 lakh crores. So तो 45-46 trillion is the total base money. उसमें से करीब
M0 लेवल पे
उसमें से करीब 10 trillion जो है वो बैंक्स डिपॉजिट्स RBI है और 36 trillion is currency.
ठीक है. Since we also GDP in dollars, तो थोड़ा ट्रांसलेशन भी कर लेते हैं. $45 trillion rupees is about $500 billion.
GDP this year is expected to be about, I would say, 326 trillion. No, actually 330 trillion rupees.
Right, called.
Right, okay. So give or take 13-14% is M0.
Okay.
Now, uske upar, so it's progressively, so as you go from M0 to M1 to M2 to M3 and so on and so forth, you...
कितने level M3 तक है?
M4 भी होता है.
अच्छा.
But M3 के ऊपर जाने का कोई सेंस नहीं है. So progressively things become less liquid. जैसे currency in circulation है कि भाई मैंने 100 रुपए के नोट निकाले, I give it to you. We all pretend that it's worth 100 rupees and then it works. This is a pretense, right? There's a certain time at which that pretense stops working, which is what happened in demonetization, for example. Right? Suddenly that old rupee, the 1,000 rupee note is not useless. So then M1 is deposits which can be withdrawn at will. If you add to that,
नहीं उसके ratio of M0 and M1, अगर M0 as you said कि 50 trillion rupees है,
so I know M3 to M0 ratio I remember 5.3 के आसपास होता है. So
20 गुना अगर M0 है
5.3 5 times.
5 times. अच्छा, ठीक है.
Right, so किसी country में 3 times होगा, किसी में 5 होगा, किसी में 4 होगा. But this is called the money multiplier. तो क्या होता है कि so deposits are less liquid. जैसे while currency I can take out and give it to you. If I have to pay from my bank account, of course now IMPS, UPI make it very simple, but earlier I would have to sort of break the deposit, take the money out and then give it. So those may were time deposit, savings deposit. वो सब, so there are various gradations. M3 more or less, I'm oversimplifying, is all the deposits in the system. Plus currency in circulation.
But let me understand. So you said M0 is about 12-13% and M3 you're saying about 5.3 times, which brings it to 65-70%. तो अगर our GDP is round numbers, अगर $4 trillion है, तो M3 उसका करीब 70%, $3 trillion हो गया.
But थोड़ा कम है, but हाँ, more or less.
But लोगों की जो wealth है, which is dramatically more than that. So my wealth is not equal to like
absolutely, which is why I said
concept.
Money is like a utility. It's a medium of exchange. The wealth of an economy, wealth in an economy, is generally between 3 to 5 times the annual income. So
even that is pretty staggering, because let's say कि आपका घर 1 करोड़ रुपए का है, मेरा 1 करोड़ का है, हम दोनों उसको कैश में कन्वर्ट नहीं कर सकते. सारी दुनिया करेगी अपनी वेल्थ को कैश में, तो देयर इज नॉट एनफ मनी फॉर अस टू, वी हैव टू जस्ट बिलीव कि दिस कैपिटल हैज सम वैल्यू व्हिच again maybe pretend.
It is pretense. So wealth is the present discounted value of all the earnings that can potentially come from that. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but तो जैसे अगर कोई बॉन्ड है, तो बॉन्ड का वैल्यू है कि भाई उसका ओवर द लाइफ टाइम ऑफ अ बॉन्ड कितना इंटरेस्ट मिलेगा. इक्विटी है, तो ओवर द लाइफ टाइम ऑफ दैट कंपनी हाउ मच डिविडेंड कैन आई गेट, और हाउ मच कैश फ्लो इट विल जनरेट, इफ यू वांट टू बी वेरी बेसिक. घर है तो इट्स theoretical value is how much is the rent that I would have had to pay if I had not owned it to live in that, and also in a terminal value. क्योंकि वो ज़मीन का वैल्यू वैसा नहीं कि आबादी जीरो हो जाएगी, तो कभी ना कभी वो ज़मीन का भी वैल्यू होगा. So there is a certain terminal value to it. So wealth is just the discounted value of all the future.
Understood. So in the monetary policy, we've created this 3-4 levels of money, M0 to M3.
In decreasing order of liquidity. Or liquidity means how easily can you access.
और क्या उनका यूज क्या होता है, कि जरूरत क्या है इतने 3-4 डिफरेंट तरह के
These are measures used to aid analysis. See, economics is a place where theory follows practice. तो ये सब चलता है ऐसे ही, मतलब money has existed for 5,000 years plus, maybe longer. And it is only an analytical framework that we are discussing. So M3 is not created, deposits are not created because some economists designed it that way. It is just that we say कि let's assume that M3, that this time and savings deposits and currency in circulation are M3.
तो थोड़ा nuance बता दो, ऐसे as we go from M0 to M3 क्या change होता है, मतलब what other categories of money keeps coming in?
वही, so पहले time deposit आते हैं, फिर savings deposit आते हैं. So so that's it. Because see, जैसे जो demand deposits हैं, demand deposits and time deposits. So demand deposits are कि at tap you can borrow it. टाइम डिपॉजिट्स आर जो कि 3 महीने का एफडी, 6 महीने का एफडी, 1 साल का एफडी, so those as progressively. M4 में लोग कुछ टाइप के लोन्स, बहुत सारी चीज़ें को वो
तो जो सेंट्रल बैंकर्स डिस्कस करते हैं कि सिस्टम में कितना मनी इन सर्कुलेशन, तो कौन सा यूज करते हैं इसमें?
बोथ. सो दे यूज M0 because that's something that they are supposed to control directly, though there are new theories on that and we can discuss that. And there is a and M2/M3. So some countries look at M2, some countries look at M3. It's not very important why they look what. India में M3 देखते हैं, US में M2 देखते हैं.
Got it. And do they watch like this M2 or M3 as a ratio of GDP? Is that an important ratio, or how do they decide कि मतलब where do we need this to be?
Yeah, so that is where I think that is what piqued my interest, because I could see that the cost of liquidity was becoming an issue. Okay, so let me first explain what cost of liquidity means. जैसे RBI sets an interest rate. It says it's called a repo rate, which is that it's at 6.25% right now.
रेपो रेट का मतलब वो,
हाँ, तो रेपो रेट का मतलब हुआ कि जिस भी दिन किसी बैंक को पैसे चाहिए, they want money
from RBI,
they can deposit some collateral. They'll say, usually accepted collateral is only government bonds, so they will deposit some government bonds and then borrow from the RBI at 6.25%. But that is called a repo because it is with the promise that they will give it back, that they give the money back.
These are very extra short.
So 7-day, overnight, 14-day. These are repo operations. But this then sets the interest rate profile for.
तो बैंक का basic cost of capital ऐसे set होता है.
होना चाहिए.
Now
क्या होता है? अभी जैसे the RBI can cut rates today, but अभी क्या है कि the marginal cost of borrowing for the bank is currently not the repo rate. It is something which is 100-150 basis points higher. There is something called CD, certificates of deposit. Basically, say someone, a mutual fund has surplus liquidity, they will say कि बॉस मैं savings account में क्यों रखूँ या मैं deposit क्यों दूँ, I will charge higher certificates of deposit. तो 12-month CD is at 760. जबकि on a 12-month equivalent duration for overnight borrowings from the RBI, you should be at 6.1. So there is a 150 basis point gap. तो पहला सवाल ये उठता है कि भाई ये इतना बड़ा गैप क्यों है? जब आरबीआई यहाँ सेट कर रहा है तो बैंक की इंक्रीमेंटल कॉस्ट इस पे यहाँ पे क्यों है? Why are banks borrowing at 760?
नहीं, 12-month CD तो as a consumer I am getting from bank, right?
नहीं. So CDs are generally on the other side. So it's a fixed deposit. हाँ. So you are getting at 760. वो उसमें see there is definitely a duration premium, meaning that कि अगर आपको बैंक को certainty चाहिए कि 12 महीने तक आपको हम पैसे वापस नहीं करेंगे, आप 12 महीने बाद ही आना हमारे पास, तो उसका दे विलिंग टू पे प्रीमियम फॉर दैट. बट जो फंडिंग मार्केट्स में क्या होता है कि जैसे मान लो कोई म्यूचुअल फंड है, म्यूचुअल फंड के पास बहुत ज़्यादा SIP आ गया और उसके फंड मैनेजर को अभी लग रहा है कि मार्केट थोड़ा चॉपी है और गिरेगा तब खरीदेंगे, और उनके पास फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी होती है 4-5%, 6% तक वो कैश होल्ड कर सकते हैं. वो कहाँ होल्ड करेंगे? तो वो कहेंगे भाई आप किसी को बैंक को चाहिए लिक्विडिटी तो ले लो हमसे. So it's like, they are like you and I, they have surplus funds, they want to put in a deposit. That's called a certificate of deposit. It's as good as a deposit, but it's much more. So जैसे अभी 5 लाख करोड़ के CDs चल रहे हैं, so our CDs outstanding है 5, so 5 लाख करोड़ जो है वो उस तरह से कॉस्ट में आ रहा है. But anyway, coming to this gap, so why is it that if the RBI thinks that overnight rates should be 625 and 12 month ahead people think it should be 6.1, तो ये 12-month CD जो है 760 पे क्यों है? And so that is when you get into कि यार there is a shortage of money.
So who is setting the price of that 12-month CD at this?
The market sets it. Which is where you take signals on the market that the market collectively seems to be short of money, which is why the person who has that money is commanding a premium for it.
The person being the banks mostly.
Yeah, it could be a bank with a surplus, it could be a mutual fund with a cash surplus, it could be you and I with surplus. तो हम लोग, तो अभी क्या है कि बैंक को अगर उस तरह की लिक्विडिटी चाहिए, उस तरह की फंडिंग चाहिए over a 3-month, 12-month or whatever duration, they have to pay a massive premium on it. So ये जो गैप है ये बहुत नैरो होना चाहिए, बहुत वाइड हो गया है.
एंड ग्लोबली बाकी कंट्री में नैरो होता है?
यस. सो इनफैक्ट जब ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस हुई थी, जो नॉर्थ अटलांटिक फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस कुछ लोग बोलते हैं, वो उस समय में ये जो स्प्रेड है उसको टेक्निकल टर्म कुछ और है, FRA, वहाँ पे फॉरवर्ड रेट्स एग्रीमेंट होता है, तो FRA OIS स्प्रेड बोलते हैं, तो वो वाइडन हो गया था. बेसिकली क्या होता है ना, बैंक्स में भी overnight there are treasury markets. जैसे bank again is a very strange organization. It operates completely on trust. It is used by the central bank to generate money. And क्या होता है, every night you have to balance कि कितने लोगों ने डिपॉजिट दिया, कितने लोगों को मैंने लोन दिया. जैसे अगर so imagine that some bank suddenly sees massive withdrawals because of whatever reason, right? उनके बहुत सैलरी अकाउंट्स हैं और किसी का बहुत खर्चा हो गया, whatever, and they can't sell all their loans, so उनका नियर टर्म लिक्विडिटी रिक्वायरमेंट वो डेफिसिट में चले जाएंगे. वैसे ही कुछ बैंक होगा जहाँ पे वो मान लो सरकारी पे आउट जो है लेट मंथ होते हैं या टैक्स का पे आउट होता है जो, so there will be banks with surplus banks. So there is an overnight market where banks do to and fro. किसी के पास surplus है तो मुझे ले लो, दूसरे को दे दो. Now, normally this would happen at close to what the central bank said rates are. But during the financial crisis, because the banks had stopped trusting each other, the FRA OIS spread had widened.
Got it.
तो लोगों को डर लगा, क्योंकि इसमें क्या है, रिस्क नहीं होता है, बिकॉज जनरली बैंक कहाँ जाएगा, मतलब दे आर वेल कैपिटलाइज्ड एंड देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ सेफ्टी. बट ड्यूरिंग दैट टाइम फाइनेंशियल फर्म्स हैड स्टॉप ट्रस्टिंग ईच अदर. So they were demanding कि बस मुझे थोड़ा प्रीमियम दो, पता नहीं तो कल तुम बचोगे कि नहीं.
ठीक है, वो तो चलो क्राइसिस के समय पे, बट इंडिया में इतना क्यों ज़्यादा?
हाँ, तो so while that was crisis driven, in India's case it is due to tightness of liquidity. There is not enough money in the system. See, because क्या होता है, money is created either by the central bank or by commercial banks. So let's start with the central bank. Central bank का balance sheet देखो, assets, liabilities. On the asset side, they own foreign currency. They own government bonds. Broadly, there are other things also, but let's oversimplify it. On the liability side, there is currency in circulation and banks deposits with RBI, which is M0.
Quantum ball per quantum कितना है इसका? Just for people to visualize कि central bank की assets GDP के comparison में कहाँ होती है?
So use it as M0. M0 plus थोड़ा कुछ reserves होंगे. मतलब see, the central bank is effectively owned by the government, so it never fails. I mean, it's not supposed to fail.
हाँ, मैं इसलिए पूछ रहा हूँ, जैसे I think currency reserve भी कुछ 600-650 billion dollar है, तो that is part of, as you said, assets.
Yeah.
And then other M0, which is also 500. So I don't know, maybe it's not maybe it's out of syllabus question, or maybe it's not relevant, but yeah.
No, it is. No, it's a see, we all have to be curious about these things. So see, currency in circulation, your liability side पे currency in circulation plus banks deposits is M0. उसके अलावा कुछ reserves होते हैं which are meant to keep the central bank solvent, because while the central bank is 100% owned by the government, it will never fail. If it goes into negative reserves, and there are banks with like Swiss central bank जो है वो negative reserves से बैठा है, but effectively it's a bankrupt entity, but no one believes that it will be bankrupt because जब जरूरत पड़ेगी तो कर देंगे. So वो सबको add करके I think central bank balance sheet would be 60 trillion. I mean, I forget the exact number. मतलब हमारा RBI का balance sheet would be 46 trillion अगर M0 है तो उसमें आप कुछ वो capital वगैरह का buffer add कर दो. You can see why I don't remember because it's not very important. But yeah, so that's about the size. Now, yeah, coming to how money is injected. So पहले so when the central bank has to inject money, it becomes a liability because या तो currency in circulation या banks deposit RBI. And on the other side, these are assets. So a central bank injects money by either buying foreign currency or buying bonds on the market. So it owns a fair bit of government bonds and it owns a lot of foreign currency and it owns a lot of gold. So ये मतलब asset side में ये आता है. So when the central bank buys dollars from the market, it prints money, it injects money. So जिससे भी लिया उसको पैसे दे दिया, वो रुपी को लेके उसको जो उपयोग करना है कर ले.
But those are foreign currency खरीद रहे हैं तो mostly I'm guessing there are a lot of non-Indian operators, like foreign currency बेचने वाला probably not a Indian operator.
तो वो बेचेगा तभी उसको रुपी चाहिए ना.
हाँ.
ये तो आरबीआई में
अच्छा, और रुपी लेके इंडिया में कुछ यूज कर रहा होगा.
So and जब लगता है कि डॉलर एक्सेस में नहीं है और खरीदने को नहीं है, जो हुआ है पिछले 4-6 महीनों में, तो they start doing bond operations. So they will just say, tell the bank or whoever holds a bond, okay, it's called open market operations. So now the RBI is restricted from buying bonds directly from the government because that leads to a lot of fiscal indiscipline. तो वो central market, secondary market से जो existing bonds हैं उनको वो खरीद सकते हैं.
तो बैंक को इंस्ट्रक्ट कर देंगे आप और बॉन्ड इशू करिए और सेंट्रल बैंक उसमें मतलब
नहीं bonds what they buy are government bonds.
अच्छा.
तो जैसे banks also hold government bonds.
तो बैंक से वो वापस खरीद लेते हैं.
बैंक से, पेंशन फंड से, जो भी बॉन्ड होल्ड करता है.
Okay.
Now तो रिटेल ओनरशिप भी बॉन्ड्स की बढ़ रही है.
This is open market operations.
These are open market operations. So what they do is they buy. So the moment they buy bonds from the market, they give money to someone else, and that actually.
And this is freshly printed money.
Freshly printed money. So this is theory. This is works wonderfully. Now the moment you, okay. So this is one part of injection of money. The second part of injection of money is where the bank gives a loan. So the bank, suppose system money is 100 rupees and Axis Bank today gives me 10 rupees of loan. Suddenly I have 10 rupees out of nowhere. मेरे डिपॉजिट में बैंक ने इच्छा हुई, बैंक ने लोन दे दिया, 10 रुपया मेरे उसमें लोन में आ गया, अकाउंट में आ गया. उसको मैं खर्च करूंगा. तो वो मेरे डिपॉजिट से आपके डिपॉजिट में जाएगा, किसी और के डिपॉजिट में जाएगा. So that is how money has been created.
तो बैंक कितना कर सकता है क्रिएट, लेकिन बैंक वो जो आपको
Good question. So this is where so there are limits to how much money a bank can create. And that measure is why tier 1 ratio, उसको capitalization का देखते हैं कि भाई आप so there are many restrictions but two major ones. The first is that you need to have adequate capital so that if the loan goes bad, the depositor's money can be still honored.
Right.
Because the moment people start distrusting banks, the economy slows down because the money multiplier खत्म हो जाता है. So which is why it is in the regulator's interest, the country's interest, the economy's interest that the banks are seen as safe. So there is a certain amount of base capital. So it's the same for the bank, right? On the asset side, you have loans and bonds. On the liability side, you have deposits and equity. कि आपने कहीं से deposit लिए और equity is जो owners of bank है उन्होंने कुछ वहाँ पे retained earnings वहाँ save की हुई. So the riskiness, whatever the risk is of the bonds and the loans that you have, उसको offset करने के लिए आपके पास enough risk capital होना चाहिए. अगर आपके पास है तो आप लोन देते रहो. The second is, it's called liquidity coverage. Basically, most banks fail because of liquidity or runs on the bank, not because of insolvency. So क्या होता है कि अगर at any point of time, the assumption is that all depositors will not ask for the money back, because deposits are for, like, there can be demand deposits जो जिस दिन चाहा मांग लिया. It could be time deposits, but 6-12 महीने से ज़्यादा के ज़्यादा deposits होते नहीं हैं. But loans can be for 5 years. Now if everyone starts asking for deposits at the same time, तो loans तो बेच नहीं सकता बैंक without a cost. So you need to maintain certain amount of liquidity. So there are norms defined. So ये अगर आप capitalization और liquidity के norms को meet कर रहे हो, तो आपको जितना लोन देना देते रहो.
बट उसको ऐसे लिमिट नहीं कि आपके डिपॉजिट अगर टोटल मिला के 100 रुपये हैं तो आप 300-400 रुपये से ज़्यादा नहीं जा सकते लोन पे.
नहीं बट डिपॉजिट्स तो सी इन थ्योरी तो आप क्रिएट कर रहे हो ना.
हाँ.
सी दैट इट सीम्स सो या सो
मतलब क्रिएशन कोई लिमिट होगी, राइट? बैंक मतलब कुछ
दैट्स द लिमिट्स आर सेट बाय व्हाट इज योर इक्विटी बेस.
अच्छा, नॉट द डिपॉजिट रेशियो, नॉट द डिपॉजिट साइज.
We'll come to that. Was where I think the policymakers went into the loan deposit ratio around March, April of 2024, and that created some of the downward spiral that we are seeing. See, what you need to manage at a bank level is ki if the loans go bad, is there enough buffer that you can eat into?
Sure.
Right? And so that depositors don't get panicked and start pulling the money out all at the same time. The second is that there needs to be adequate liquidity. So that X% of depositors, if they were to withdraw money at the same time, you will be able to service that demand.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there is no need to have an additional metric for loan deposit ratios. Though the RBI did try to impose that around March, April of last year. And in that, I think they ignored the fact that capitalization was much better and they need not have worried about it. Because क्या होता है ना, अगर suppose you focus on loan deposit ratio, the fear is that not every depositor, what if every depositor was to ask for their money back? But equity भी तो एक important source of capital, source of funding the loans है. Equity तो कहीं नहीं जाएगा because that's the most sticky of it all. So if, say in 2013, capitalization was at 10% and today it is at 15%. The loan deposit ratio that was a sign of concern in 2013 would be very different or much lower, but much higher than the ratio now. So you can take it to much higher now.
Understood.
So anyway, coming back to the money creation thing. So the central bank creates money, the commercial banks create money. Now, think about the complexity of this. How does the central bank create money? So we know that the outcome is that they end up owning a lot of bonds and they end up with a lot of money on the liability side. But overnight, how does it work? जैसे आज को अगर RBI ने ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशंस किए, राइट, सो सपोज दे बॉट बॉन्ड्स फ्रॉम सम बैंक्स, वो तो मान लीजिए 1 लाख करोड़ 1,000 करोड़ के बॉन्ड्स खरीद लिए उन्होंने, तो उनका असेट साइड में उन्होंने वो ले लिया और 1,000 करोड़ का उन्होंने मनी जो है वो बैंक को दे दिया. बट वो क्योंकि उस समय अगर लोन डिमांड नहीं है उस रात में, तो वो वापस बैंक RBI में पार्क हो गया. तो सिस्टम में तो पैसे कुछ गए ही नहीं.
RBI में क्यों पार्क हो जाएगा?
क्योंकि अगर 1,000 करोड़ मान लो,
ना आपने बैंक से खरीदा, RBI ने बॉन्ड खरीद लिए, बैंक को दे दी, तो बैंक के पास है ना वो पैसे.
हाँ बैंक के पास है, बट बैंक ओवरनाइट रखेगा कहाँ?
अच्छा.
राइट, बिकॉज बैंक के पास सरप्लस है, तो बैंक उसका करेगा क्या? तो लेके बैठा हुआ है till the time that it starts to lend again. And so a lot of the surplus money gets parked overnight with the RBI.
अच्छा.
वो एक रिवर्स रेपो और ये सब का होता है.
Because RBI वो 6% इंटरेस्ट दे रहा है.
Correct. So anyway, so the point being that the movement of money creation. अब जैसे there are some people who think that RBI cannot control M0. Now, I do think that RBI should control and can control M0, but there are people who think, you see, it is currency in circulation.
Can control मतलब shouldn't control or cannot, like it's not possible the way. I mean, the people who think.
Yeah, so I'll explain to you what that means. So see, जैसे हमने M0 का बोला, there is currency in circulation and there is banks deposit with RBI. Banks deposit with RBI is the cash reserve ratio. वो तो एक बार रेशियो सेट हो गया, तो जितना डिपॉजिट्स का सिस्टम में डिपॉजिट्स हैं उसका 4% जो है वो यहाँ आ जाएगा. करेंसी इन सर्कुलेशन इज कम्प्लीटली डिमांड ड्रिवन. बिकॉज जैसे वो साबुन तेल का चलता है ना कि भाई लोगों ने डिमांड किया, किसी ने शैम्पू खरीद लिया, रिटेलर का इन्वेंट्री कम हुआ तो होलसेलर ने रिप्लेनिश किया, होलसेलर की इन्वेंट्री कम हुई तो फैक्ट्री से बन के आ गया. तो करेंसी भी वैसे ही चलती है कि जैसे ही किसी ने डिमांड किया करेंसी, कि मान लो समवन गोज टू द ATM एंड विड्रॉज मनी, देन ATM में खाली हुआ तो एक रीजनल जो करेंसी चेस्ट होता है वहाँ से पैसा आया, करेंसी चेस्ट में इन्वेंट्री कम हुई तो RBI ने प्रिंट करके और डाल दिया. सो इट्स अ डिमांड ड्रिवन थिंग. सो देन सम पीपल विल क्वेश्चन कि बस में RBI क्या करेगा? इकोनॉमी की जरूरत पड़ेगी तो मनी क्रिएट हो जाता है. सो देयर इज दिस थ्योरी दैट मनी सप्लाई इज एंडोजेनस, यानी इकोनॉमी क्रिएट्स द मनी दैट इट नीड्स, दैट द सेंट्रल बैंक cannot inject money. Right? So if you think about it, CRR is 4% of whatever deposits there are, and deposits are created by banks.
Yeah.
So तो इसमें RBI क्या करेगा? Now, so that is why, see, these are the moment at which money injection happens is very unclear. So what I think is, and so anyway, to complete that theory, in money there is a cost of money and there is a quantity of money. Cost of money is the interest rate. Quantity of money is how much money is there in the system. There are theories now that you cannot control both at the same time. I mean, it reminded me almost of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that, the momentum and location of a particle cannot be both accurately determined at the same time. So there are people who are hardliners who will say that, boss, any central bank, forget about just RBI, any central bank should just control interest rates. The economy will create the money that it needs.
So, like, काफी टाइम में economic policy में जो quantitative easing and tightening also comes up a lot, especially when there are big movements in economic slowdown, etc. So you are saying that is a somewhat of a lesser tool compared to just managing things.
I don't disagree. Okay. I don't agree with that view that money supply is endogenous. I think that cost of money and quantity of money are not independent variables. I mean, there is some dependency. If you have very high interest rates, the economy slows down and money creation slows down. If you have very low interest rates, the reverse happens. But it would be wrong to say that I will just manage the quantity of money by looking at the cost of money.
But इसमें actually थोड़ा सा मेरे को भी confusion हो रहा है कि we talk about M0, which is the currency in circulation.
Plus banks deposits, yeah.
Plus bank deposits. Maybe linked to that is
banks deposit with the RBI.
अभी तो mostly we all deal with digital money, and actual hard currency seems, at least, it's lessening in use. So how does that play? When we
So, which is why banks and digitization have led to an increase in the money multiplier. That that with less amount of currency in circulation, you can manage a much larger economy. So, so when I say banks deposits with the RBI, it is that 4% of the overall deposits that have to be kept as liquidity. So, so the RBI or any central bank can and should control this base money. Exactly how it gets done is something that is one of those mysteries. Like, and there's another parallel I use, like, in the blast furnace where steel is made. People who work with blast furnaces will tell you that no one really understands how it works. Right? What you know is that if you put this much of oxygen through here, you maintain this temperature, you put so much of powdered carbon, and this is the flux and this is the iron ore, then the throughput is something. And if you tweak this is what happens. But exactly how this thing works, no one really knows. So you kind of tweak the parameters and figure out. And I think money making is somewhat like that. So if you get into the attractive theoretical aspects that money supply is endogenous, I will just look at, you will goof up, which I think is what happened.
So earlier you mentioned that there is probably less money in the system now. Where is maybe talk more about that. What do you mean by there's less money in the system? And if there is were to be more, उससे क्या economic क्या impact होगा?
Correct. So, so think about the outcome of this today. So RBI has cut rates, or MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, has cut rates by 25 basis points. What is the impact of that? Very little impact. Because, see, there is something called an external benchmark lending rate. So, to speed up transmission, meaning that when the RBI cuts rates, that the effective interest rate should come down, the RBI has instructed that most loans should have an external benchmark. Now you are free to choose the external benchmark. You can be repo rate, could be bond yield, it could be something. Now, for every bank, say between 10 to 30%, 40% of the loans are linked to the external benchmark, right? Or say to the repo rate. Now, those loans become cheaper 1 month later, when the next reset is to happen. But because the marginal cost of borrowing for a bank is still 7.6%, or say 7.3% 3-month CD, the new loans that it gives will not be any cheaper. So the rate cut is totally ineffective. And so once you start exploring that, you wonder, why is 3-month CD at 7.3? Why is the cost of funding, cost of liquidity today so much higher than what the RBI is prescribing it to be? And that's when you realize that there is a shortage of money in the system.
Got it.
So if the if there was enough money in the system, then these rates would be much closer to. So this is what I call the cost of liquidity, because during the financial crisis, this gap was because of lack of trust. You didn't trust the other organization. Now there is no. I mean, all banks are safe, very well capitalized, and all that. So, so this liquidity is the. That's why I think liquidity is tight.
Got it.
And the proximate the reason for this, the more near-term reason for this, is that when the RBI had to sell $60 billion to protect the rupee from very rapid depreciation, it effectively took out 5 lakh crores, 5 trillion rupees from the system. So just like, to inject money, it buys dollars.
So
So when you sell dollars, you buy rupees.
And why is it important to, like, so-called, defend the rupee? And in general, my broader question, why is it for a country like ours, rupee has been just perennially, depreciating? I remember 90s when I went to US, it was $1 to 35 rupees. And now we are, almost looking at, 90 rupee in the, near future. So why is that? Why is the rupee keeps depreciating? Is this bad for us? It is inevitable. And why does RBI care about this?
See, because the currency by itself is, as I said, a myth. And different economies have different equilibrium levels of inflation. So the US, for example, targets 2% inflation. We target 4% inflation. And that too is more of a recent occurrence. There was a time when policymakers were happy with 6% inflation. Now imagine a country where average inflation is 6% and a country where average inflation is 2%. So over a period of time, things become a lot more expensive if the exchange rate was fixed. And then exports become less competitive, imports become very attractive because this is only growing 2%. And periodically this inflation gap starts to play an
So
effect.
broadly, is currency depreciation linked to the inflation delta between the two currencies?
Yes, it works over very long periods of time, but that's the easiest way to explain it. In the near term, the exchange rate is determined primarily by the demand and supply of the currency. So if today the demand for dollars is greater than the supply of dollars, and if you're sitting in India, then the rupee will depreciate.
So if you're a net importer, we are putting pressure on our currency.
Okay. That is part of the story, but there is also capital flows.
Okay.
So see, the balance of payments is just the net demand supply for dollars, is the sum of your current account and your capital account. So the current account is, as you said, imports of goods and services and exports of goods and services. So if you produce more than you consume, you have a current account surplus. So you have more dollars than you need. And if you consume more than you produce, you have less dollars, and so therefore you need some funding. It's like, a household which consumes more than it produces, so it needs a continuous supply of external funding, borrowing or sale of assets or whatever. And so that comes from the capital account. So the capital account is where you take external loans, you get foreign portfolio investors to buy. So basically you are selling your assets to foreign owners. You are getting foreign direct investment. Foreign companies are coming and owning factories and land here. So the sum of current account and capital account is your balance of payment. So you can have a current account deficit of 3% of GDP or 2% of GDP, so long as you are able to finance it. So you are making your economy attractive enough for large multinationals to invest in India, direct investment. Portfolio investors are interested in your bonds and or your Indian companies are able to take dollar debt. If you can balance it, the rupee will remain stable.
Got it. So this just managing, this money supply would you say is a big part of, how you are managing your economy and the incentives in the economy?
Absolutely. This is very critical. Money is like blood in the body, and the right quantity of blood, while the body tends to create the blood that it needs, somewhat like the economy creates the money that it needs. If you have excess of it, you have too much inflation. If you have and a weak currency, if you have too little of it, you slow down the economy.
So this is a very speculative question, and I'm not sure whether there's going to be a precise answer, but to what extent, the GDP growth rate or what portion of that can be attributed if your money policy is absolutely spot on versus, you have their laxes, here and there, not managing it can impact growth by 0.5%, 1%, 2%?
Yeah, so that I don't think there is a very easy way to find a deterministic formula which will link the two. But yes, if you have, I think, in fact, my belief is that a very meaningful part of the economic slowdown, say from 7.5% to the 5.6 and 6% growth that we have seen, is actually driven by the liquidity tightening. So what has happened is that there's not enough money in the system for credit to grow. And as a result of that, we have, I think, had maybe a 60, 80, maybe 1% point growth headwind. And if we were to address that, then, and the faster we address that, the better it is, then we can see a rebound.
And why would people err on the side of access rather than shortage? Because of inflation concerns.
Inflation. So if you have too much money, then that's the sure sign of inflation.
And inflation in the end hurts the poor man the most because they have limited. I'm guessing. Yeah. And,
Yes,
and why is there so much concern? 4% versus 5%. You will not mind paying 1% more for your potatoes and onions.
No, but see, that's one way of looking at it. And like in economics, I mean, every perspective is important. But I don't think that's the big problem.
No.
See, because there are currency adjustments that need to happen based on what your inflation is. Your cost of capital gets affected. So imagine that your inflation is 2%, and therefore the nominal cost of borrowing is say 3% or 4%, whereas if your inflation is 6% and your nominal cost of borrowing is 8%, half the factories which are capital intensive will not work, and therefore for example, even when the UK was a middle income economy or an emerging market, it was the low countries, Belgium, Netherlands. The biggest advantage that the Dutch had, if you remember, the Dutch were bigger, or they were ahead of the UK, 300 years, 400 years back. It was because the cost of capital was lower. So it's very important to keep cost of capital low because it helps capital investment, and labor has, you can't grow labor input too much. You can create capital formations. Anyway, so low interest rates and low inflation help. What is required even more is stability. So whether it is 4% or 5% or 6%, if you can keep it stable and predictable, then businesses can then act on it. So then you can assume that the currency will depreciate by X% every year, and that interest rates will be stable. The problem is if inflation today is 3% and then it is 7% somewhere, and then 6 months later, then you don't know how to price your goods. It slows down investment. Because see, beyond a point, or not beyond a point, actually, inflation is a sum total of price increases for all goods and services. So it would be wrong to say that inflation only hurts the poor.
Okay.
Right? So it is quite possible that inflation is occurring because the wages of the poor are rising.
Is inflation required?
Yes.
Why?
Because it creates the trigger. So the best way to explain it is if why deflation is bad. In some cases, of course, deflation is very good also. But so deflation. So assume that. So suppose that we are in a situation where prices fall by 2% every year. So everyone will say, boss, let me buy 6 months later. So I will get things cheaper. And because they're buying fewer things, so there are fewer people investing because the factories are not getting utilized. And they're also saying, let me do the capex 1 year later. So it kind of slows things down. And then on the inflation side, so it makes sense for you to buy something today.
More expensive tomorrow.
Otherwise, it will be more expensive tomorrow.
It's almost like incentive for consumption.
Incentive for
production.
And investment, production, everything. So, but there is a certain threshold beyond which the marginal utility becomes negative.
Got it. And as you were studying, this whole money creation, the linkage with the country's economic growth and so on, where does this whole advent of cryptocurrency plays? It was getting a lot of attention, probably less so, this Bitcoin continues to be, pretty much near record highs. Is that relevant, as an economist, or it's a fringe phenomena?
Okay, cryptocurrencies by themselves are not a fringe phenomena, and I think they have an important role to play. They will have an important role to play as we go forward. I think unbacked cryptocurrencies definitely are a fringe phenomenon. Because, frankly, the role of the state is, so the Leviathan, the controlled Leviathan or whatever, what the government is, that we give some people authority to govern us, and then there's order and law and all that. The way that power is exercised is by the control on the mint and the control on the army. So physical force and monetary control. Now, only one entity has the right to print money. Now, if you have a stable coin, which is say backed one-on-one to the rupee or even the central bank issues, in India has issued retail CBDC and wholesale CBDC, the central bank digital currency. Then it has its own utility, and we can discuss that. The moment you have something which is unbacked, there you are kind of playing with anarchy, and whether that will work or not work, time will tell. But it is not in the interest of the state to actually support it, because that is kind of threatening stability of the state itself. Because then how do you control people? They will avoid paying tax. There will be parallel things that start happening, and so that's why I don't understand the euphoria around it. I can understand that it is speculative and there's a lot of money, so people are punting on it. I don't understand the utility for it. Cryptocurrencies can be very powerful where trust is very expensive. Like cross-border payments is a very classic use case where it can cost 3 to 5% to establish trust, and this bank has to, this person has to trust their bank, the bank has to trust the other bank, and then there is a currency conversion cost and all of that. It can cost 5%. But if it is CBDC and there is public blockchain with trust embedded, you don't need intermediaries which command a big premium. So for many use cases, I think it has very significant.
Cool. So where, Neelkanth, do we start this conversation with you going on this trip of trying to understand the whole money creation, money supply better? Having done that in excursion, do you feel like now you have much deeper understanding, or it's somewhat of a dark art for everyone involved?
I don't think I can claim that I understand it. Frankly, I haven't met anyone who understands it. Maybe Milton Friedman understood it. Maybe there are a handful of people who perhaps understood it. Maybe some people in some of the central banks understand it. There are people who study it for a living. See, I'm a dilettante, dabbling in this, dabbling in that. I spend a few hours here and there. I can't become an expert. But frankly, I have met several central bank governors, deputy governors. I don't think they understand it either. I'm not talking about specific people in RBI or Fed or whatever. I'm talking about generally, talking about people who have worked in central banks. I don't think money creation is something that...
And the people who are market practitioners, market watchers, general interest in economy, is an important topic for people to understand at least some,
It's very important to understand, because it is part of the reason we've seen a growth slowdown is because people misread or at least did not watch it carefully enough. So it's one of those things, like a doctor will tell you, like sleep well, that sleep 8 hours or 7 hours, don't eat too much sugar. Now, exactly with what mechanism sleep works, or so we don't understand. But we know that broadly, if you are in this zone, in this band, you will be healthy. I think it's the same with money as well, that you may not understand it and be able to explain it. Maybe people understand it also, sometimes the words are not enough to explain it. So frankly, I haven't met anyone who can explain to me in great depth how this works, but it is extremely important that we manage money well as a policy tool, and be aware that the Indian or the configuration of the Indian money-making machine could be very different from the US or the European or the UK money-making machine. Because you were rightly saying that they were doing quantitative easing because they realized that just bringing overnight rates to zero was not helping. So they wanted to bring down cost of capital. So they said, you know what, I'm going to promise buying so many of these government bonds that the long-term cost of capital will come down. And so they've experimented with those things. In our case, we are solving a very different problem. So we need to be very aware that the Indian configuration can be very different.
Got it. It's amazing, Neelkanth. I think as an economist, I think one of the unique things about you is you are perennially a student of economics. I think you will keep finding ways to learn, not only the technicalities, but also big, historical perspective. And then you have, this amazing ability to connect the dots and and explain in a way that people like me and our listeners on this podcast can understand. So I love coming back to you and having conversation with you about different aspects of economy. And keep up with the amazing work. And we'll see you over our next annual trip.
Thank you, Mukesh.
Thank you. At SparX, we aim to bring to you stories of exponential impact. We share in-depth analysis of what goes behind success stories. If you find our conversations interesting, you can join us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to SparX on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other audio platform of your choice. If you have any suggestions on who we should invite or what topics we need to cover, just let us know in the comments. We are always listening, looking for ways to improve, and keep getting better as we go along.